good day this afternoon, or maybe it's morning or evening, depending on where you are. I'm Adrian Rijkens. I'm the CTO of Warp, and I think it's great that I can do this second webinar on the Warp Studio. So the first webinar was about more the basics on how to use the Warp Studio, and this webinar will be a deep dive on how to use the Warp Studio. So we'll be a little bit more on some detailed items on the Warp Studio, how to even get more out of this software. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to walk through some of the functionalities that you can use on the Warp Studio. And after that, after showing you, that will be around 30-35 minutes. After that, you can send me questions via the email. You can send it to adrian@warp.industries. And after showing you the deep dive, I will look at the emails and see what questions I can answer. So that will be the process. So let me start with sharing the screen and get you into this deep dive into the Warp Studio. So there you go. You should now see my whole screen. And as you see now, I'm going to start where we left off during the previous webinar. I will give a little bit of an introduction of what we did in the previous webinar. So during the previous webinar, we created a scenario, a training scenario called customer service. This was a training on how to act when a customer enters a store, and this customer could be either happy or angry. It was a nice way to understand how to create a first scenario. What I want to do as first step is I'll go to my scenarios overview, and I actually want to start with my first tip, because during this webinar I want to dive into this customer service and show you some new functionalities. But a great way to do this without actually changing anything on what we already created during the last webinar is duplicating the scenario. So as you see, when I hover over this scenario, it will have 3 dots, and I can select duplicate scenario. So let me do this now and call it the deep dive customer service. And select duplicate. And as you will see now, I jump into the new scenario. But here you can also see that now a new scenario has been created called deep dive customer service. So what I can also do now is maybe change some of the settings. So I might want to use a new scenario image. So when I go to browse, I can go to a new thumbnail. So let me just upload a new thumbnail. And once that's loaded, yeah, so here you can find a new thumbnail. So I've got this new scenario ready for this webinar. So let's dive into this scenario. I will select it and we'll start in the flow again. So in the flow, I can find every step of my training. And as you've seen in the previous webinar, we created a direction scene, a multiple choice scene, and also an auto transition scene. I want to create a new scene, but let me just copy this direction scene. So the first scene, I want to copy that or duplicate it. And actually, it's the same process as what we just done with the scenario. If I want to duplicate a scene, you can just select the 3 dots and select duplicate scene. And now everything of that scene will be duplicated. And I wanted to use this for an example on how to change a scene type. Because if we dive into scenes, you can create a lot of different scenes. You can create an information scene, multiple choice, direction, auto transition. So this is what we all covered during the previous webinar. But as you see here, you can also create a hotspot scene. I want to create one, but I just don't want to create one. I actually want to change the scene into a hotspot scene. So when I go into this direction scene, I can use the 3 dots and can select change scene type. So this way I can always change a scene to a different type. And I will discuss the hotspot scene and what you can do with that. So let me just change the scene type. And let me start telling you what you can do with a hotspot scene. So a hotspot creates different places you can look at in a VR scene. In this example, I want to discuss, because we were discussing a customer entering a store. In this example, I wanted to show multiple customers which you can select. So let me first change the scene, and let's say we've got multiple customers we can approach. So I'll select customer A, customer B, and customer C. I'll create these, and I'll create large hotspots. So I'll show you later how that works. So once I've created these, you can drag and drop these answers to the place where you want it to be. But let me first dive into the scene to show how a hotspot scene looks like. So as you see now, we're in the hotspot scene. And here in the media, you can directly see the hotspots. So these are these round circles, and we can add them at different places in the scene. So you can imagine that in this case, we have to approach a customer, but there could be many customers you have to approach to or talk with. Furthermore, you also see now the labels above these hotspots. So customer A, B, and C, but maybe I don't want to show these labels. So let me actually go to the top right of this scene and select Edit Scene. And here I can select Hide Hotspot Labels in VR mode. If I select that and select Save, you will now see that the labels aren't there anymore. So in this scene, a customer walks into the store, but you've got here also a customer, and you also got here some customers. So now something would happen if you would look at those customers. And I can imagine that you don't want these hotspots to show because they're quite big, they're quite intrusive in your VR scene. So there's also another functionality if it comes to hotspots. If I go to the top right again, I can start going to Edit Scene, and here I can select Hide Complete Hotspot. So you can completely hide the hotspot, and you can decide for how long, because maybe somebody doesn't understand, like the trainee does not understand what to select. So you can decide for how long you would like to do this. So in this case, let's say you want to do it for 60 seconds. Might be quite long, but let's select that. So it will take 60 seconds before the hotspots appear. However, that does not mean that you cannot select the hotspots because they're just hidden, but you can select them. This will not show here in your example. The hotspots will still show, but in the VR app, these hotspots will not show. They will only show after 60 seconds in this case. So this is the first part where you can use a hotspot for. But what I just want to add to this, hotspots you can use for any kind of situation. This is in case of a customer entering a store, but also think of more kind of an engineering situation where you've got a machine and multiple elements can be selected. Multiple levers of a machine can be selected, for example. You can use hotspots for that. So that's the hotspot scene. I want to discuss another point, and this is something you can add to any scene, but let's stay in this hotspot, and that's the timer element. The timer element is actually there for if you do not make a choice, because not making a choice is also a choice of the trainee. So let's say in this scene, a customer walks into the store, the customer is waiting to be helped, and at some point the customer leaves. So what you do in that situation, you can use the timer and say that after, for example, 30 seconds, the customer will leave. So as you see here again, I go to the top right corner of the scene, I select Add Timer, and now I can add a timer. I'll set it to 30 seconds. When I add it, you see here that the timer has been added. It's set to 30 seconds, but the timer hasn't got a link yet. let's just create in the flow a scene that's called customer leaves. So let's make a transition scene. That would be nice if that happens. So I can make here a auto transition scene, customer leaves. And add an ending to that because the training will end from there. And now I go back to the hotspot. And now at the timer part, I can select after 30 seconds, if nothing has been done by a trainee, it has to go to customer leaves. And I can also add points to that. So in this case, there are penalty points. So I could say like, okay, this is something that has to be punished. This is not a good thing that happens. A customer leaving the store, that's something you don't want to happen. So that's 2 penalty points. Lastly, you can also decide if you want to have the timer visible or not. The timer is now set to visible, but by using this drop-down, I can also select it to not being visible. You can decide what's most suitable for the situation. So this is the timer element. And as I said, you can do that for every scene except for the auto transition scene. There you don't use a timer functionality, but for the information, multiple choice, direction scenes, you can also add a timer. So now I just want to get rid of this scene after showing you. So let me just delete this scene. You can always delete a scene, as you see here. And now I just wanted to show you another thing we've got in this scenario, another functionality. It's called the randomizer. So in this example, you can walk towards a customer and you can ask a question to the customer. You can either ask a question that makes the customer react happy, or you can make a question, or you can give a question that makes the customer angry. But what if the same question can either make the customer happy or angry? You can use the randomizer for that. And the randomizer is a great way to really make it a big surprise for a trainee who's playing a scenario over and over again to make the scenario every time different for the trainee. So let me show how this works. So if I now go to the question or the answer called, hey, you look like you're in a rush, how may I help? I can select this answer and now I can go to randomize. I can select how many scenes I want to randomize. So it can be either 2, 3, or it could be a custom number. In this case, I will select 2. And now you see I get another A. And now I can drag this one to a customer reacts angry. So in this case, the customer will always, so in the case of answer B, please grab a ticket to be helped, the customer will always react angry. But in answer A, it will either, the customer will now react happy or angry. So it will always be a surprise for the trainee. So that's the way how to add the randomizer. I would just like to show you, now I'm working on this, sometimes things can be a bit tangled in the flow. It's good to really find your way on how to make things look a little bit more neat and better. So you can, for example, zoom out once a scenario becomes bigger and start putting the flow in a little bit more neat order. We just created this customer leave scene with an ending, and what you can do is you can drag both cards also. But what I like to do is select multiple cards by selecting a part in the canvas, holding my mouse button down and selecting multiple parts. So this way I can actually drag and drop everything of a scenario and make it more neat. So this was this is a way to look around. I can also use this button to turn around the cards. Let me just zoom in and show you how that looks like. So if I turn the cards around, everything turns around. And if you've got a very big scenario, this makes it a little bit more neat to look at. What I can also do when I've got a big scenario is kind of search for a certain scene. So we had the scene where a customer reacts happy, a customer reacts angry. So let me search for the scene angry. And as you see, it moves to the scene that I'm looking for. But this is a great way to navigate through the flow. Of course, this is quite a small scenario still, but if you've got a very big scenario, it's really useful to use these kind of ways to navigate. So if it comes to tips and tricks, last time during the webinar, I was discussing how to add a storyboard to your scenario. And I just wanted to show you one more time how to do that and how you can see that back in the tests. Because I think it's a great functionality to use when you're making a scenario and you haven't got the video content yet. So let me just dive into the first two scenes to show you. So when I go to the first scene, I can add, so let me just delete the previous scene impression, and now I can add a new scene impression. I already had one ready for this webinar, and the first one will be outside of the store scene impression. So the customer is outside of the store, as you see here. If I would go to the second scene, that would be the scene where you ask a question to the customer. So if I would add a scene impression, this would look like this way. So now if I would test this, I can start the scenario, and whilst testing, you'll have these scene impressions. So this really helps on getting an idea what this scenario will be about before filming. You can even use photos of the location to maybe give a little bit more of a feeling around what will happen. So this is a great way to do storyboarding within the Warp Studio. Next up is actually scoring. Scoring is a very important part of your scenario and training. In the end, a score will be given to the trainee, and based on the score, the trainee will get some feedback. So how will that look like? How does that work? During the previous webinar, I didn't talk a lot about it, so let me show you now a little bit more extensively. We've got in the Warp Studio on scenario level, we've got endings. If I go to the endings, you'll now see a couple of different options that you will see as a trainee. So you can either get 5 stars, 4, 3, 2, or 1 star. So this is based on the scoring system. To set the scoring system, you can go in the top right corner here, or you can use the 3 dots and select Set Scoring System. I will now just use this part, Set Scoring System. And as you see, we've got 3 different ways to set the scoring systems. You can either set them to be subtract points, you can add points, or you can even select no points. Let me first start with no points and then go through the other options. So when I set my scenario to no points will be given. So there will be just one ending. The trainee will just see one feedback screen after completing the training. In this case, it says, well done, play the scenario again, or go back to the menu. But when I select this, I can write anything. Great job, for example. You will also now see in the flow that when I select one of the answers, that I cannot give any points to the answers, because everything is neutral. There's no right or wrong in this one. But let's change the scoring system. Let's set the scoring system to subtract points. So these are what I used to call penalty points. I will set it to this, and as you see here, if you get 0 penalty points, you get 5 stars. That's the best score. You do a great job. And if you get more than 3 points, you just get 1 star. You can actually set this point system. When in set scoring system, you can go to 1 star equals, and let me just set them to 2 points as an example. Here you now see that, of course, if you go 0 points, you still get 5 stars. But now you actually have to get more than 6 points to get 1 star. And in the flow, of course, to set these penalty points, you'll just go to points now, You can select, for example, 2 penalty points. But if I actually go to the scoring system again, there's also another option. It's called add points. So in this case, you get like points that are for good answers, So I'll select these. So in this case, if you got actually no points, you get 1 star. But if you get more than 9 points, so 10 and up, you get 5 stars. This is again based on 1 star equals 2 points. I can set this back to 1 point again. As you will see, it will change again. So in this case, if you get more than 4 points, you get 5 stars. And if you got just 1 point, 0 or 1 points, you get 1 star. And in the flow, you'll see this being shown with green arrows. And I can also set custom points, for example. This is how scoring works. So you've got the 3 ways of scoring, either subtracting, adding points, or having no points at all. Lastly, I want to show something in the scenario, which you might have seen when I was going to the 3 dots. And that's the Add Document PDF selection. So what's this part? Actually, in real life, engineers sometimes have got a manual, and they can have that all the time with them. So if you create a training where you want them to see the trainee, you want the trainee to see the manual, you can use this functionality. If you add a PDF to your scenario, this PDF will be shown to the trainee in VR. He will see, if he looks below, he will see a button that says show this PDF. You can actually give the document a title which the trainee will see. So this is a great way to add a manual for the trainee to look at during the training scenario. So this is the last part on the scenario part I want to show you on the flow. Next one up is I just want to discuss a little bit more about account settings and organization switching. So let me go to my account switch settings. It's in the top right corner. If I go to account settings, and here you see my account. You see there are actually 2 managers in this account, which are both me in this case. And you can also change the avatar if you'd like to. I can do that if I use the 3 dots. Let me just select. If I go to my own profile, actually, I can do this. I can select the avatar and also change my name. Actually, the other profiles can only be changed by the designated manager. Furthermore, in my account settings, I can also go to this tab, Account. Here, when I go to the branding part, I want to show you a couple of things. First of all, I want to show you the logo. Here, you can actually change the logo to your own logo. So I could select a certain logo from, let me just select the logo and change it. So here you can select your own logo to show in the Warp VR app. There's also a logo possible for in VR. You can change that here. And furthermore, you can also change your app information. This is actually the part that's shown in the settings. When I want to change this, it's now called Webinar VR Training Center. So that will be shown also in the top of the app. And furthermore, there will be a description. And you can change that. This description can be, for example, about your company or about the training department of your company. You can add all the information you want here about your department or company. Lastly, you can also select the coloring. You can select the primary color, which is actually the color mainly of the buttons. So I can make this one, for example, red. As you see, I can use the hexes indication. And the secondary color I can set here, which is mainly used, for example, for the stars, to show the stars at the end. And I can set this, for example, to such a color. So in this way, you can create a little bit more the branding identity of your company in the Warp Studio to be reflected in the Warp VR app. Lastly, I would like to show you another functionality we just introduced. It's called organization switching. If I go to the top right corner and I hover over create or switch organization, I can now select which client I want to see or which organization I want to see. So now I'm in the webinar, but I can also select client 1. Because in the end, organization switching, you can use that to service, for example, multiple clients. Or maybe you've got multiple departments within your organization. You can create new organizations for that if you don't want all trainings to be on the same organization level. It's really easy to create a new organization. All you have to do is go to the top right corner, create or switch organization, and select add organization. I'll call it now client 2. And add it. As you now will see, a new organization has been added. So this was actually the part where I wanted to show you the deep dive on the Warp Studio and what's all possible. And I'm actually now quite interested to see if you've got any questions, so you can even maybe do a deeper dive into the Warp Studio. So let me just go to my mail and see if there's already some questions that I can answer. I see here from Claire, it's a question on, can I decide where the timer shows? So I guess this question is about where the timer will be shown in the app. Currently, this is a fixed position. So with the direction scene and the multiple choice scene, you can decide where something is being shown. In this case, in the app, the timer will be shown. It really depends on what app you're using. If you're using the Gear VR Oculus Go, with a controller, the timer will actually be shown on the controller. So there you will see the timer. If you're using it more for a cardboard device, the timer will be shown where the dot is, selection dot. Below that, you'll see the timer. And lastly, if you use it in 2D mode, where you have to look around using your finger, it will be shown in the bottom screen. So thanks, Claire, for this question. So I hope that is enough for you to use the timer. Let me just go to my email and see if there are other questions. It's on this organization switching by Denise. If I create a new organization, how does this work with pricing? That's a good question. I, of course, did not mention that. If it comes to having multiple organizations, actually every organization has a separate pricing. So you can find on the warp.studio website, you can find our pricing. And that's based on on an organization. So if you've got multiple organizations, you have multiple pricing. We do have, if you really need a lot of organizations, there is an enterprise package, and you have to contact us about that if you're really interested in that. Otherwise, you'll just have to look at what kind of plan you have, and that will be for every organization. You have to decide, have to add it up. So thanks for that question. Let me just check my mail again to see if there are any other questions. Yeah, so that's it, I guess, for now. So if you've got any other questions, you can always send an email to hello@warp.industries. We're happy to really help you. For now, I would really like to thank you for taking the time for this deep dive into the Warp Studio. Good day.